The grand ballroom aboard the Ocean Empress glittered beneath crystal chandeliers imported from Italy. Golden light reflected across polished marble floors, while the Atlantic Ocean stretched endlessly beyond the massive panoramic windows. The annual Ashford Oceanic Gala was considered one of the most exclusive events in the cruise industry. Billionaires, investors, politicians, celebrities, and executives from around the world gathered aboard the luxury vessel each year. Yet among all the powerful people inside the ballroom, the person attracting the most attention wasn't a billionaire. It was the ship's captain, Captain Daniel Carter. At 38 years old, Daniel had become something of a legend within Ashford Oceanic Cruises. Passengers admired him, crew members trusted him, industry insiders respected him, not because he sought attention, but because he never did. While executives competed for influence and recognition, Daniel quietly focused on his responsibilities. He knew every corner of his ship, every member of his crew, and every passenger safety protocol by heart. Most importantly, he never forgot why he worked. His daughter, Emily Carter, 7 years old, the center of his world. The reason he declined promotions that required constant travel, the reason he arranged every schedule around school pickups, the reason he left every evening call unanswered after a certain hour. Some executives found it strange. Daniel never cared. As far as he was concerned, there was nothing more important than being present when his daughter needed him. Across the ballroom, Olivia Hart watched him from a distance. CEO of Ashford Oceanic Cruises, 43 years old, one of the most powerful women in the maritime industry. A woman who had spent 2 decades building an empire. Yet at that moment, none of her accomplishments seemed particularly important. Because she couldn't stop watching the captain. The frustrating part wasn't that she admired him. It was that she admired him for reasons she couldn't easily explain. Daniel wasn't flashy, he wasn't wealthy, he wasn't trying to impress anyone. In fact, he often seemed completely unaware of the effect he had on people. That alone made him different from almost every executive Olivia encountered. "You're staring again." Olivia looked up. Patricia Holloway, her longtime chief operations officer, stood beside her holding a glass of sparkling water. "I am not," Patricia smiled. "You absolutely are." Olivia sighed. "I was observing." "Of course." Patricia followed her gaze toward Daniel. "He is handsome." "That isn't the point." "Then what's the point?" Olivia considered the question. The answer surprised even her. "He seems happy." Patricia raised an eyebrow. "Most people would describe him as disciplined." "No." Olivia shook her head. "Disciplined people still look exhausted." "He doesn't." Patricia glanced toward Daniel again. The captain stood speaking with several junior officers. He listened carefully, nodded occasionally, then checked his watch. Immediately afterward, he excused himself and headed toward an exit. "Where's he going?" Olivia asked. Patricia smiled knowingly. "His daughter is waiting." The CEO felt something unexpected, envy. Not of his life, not of his income, not of his responsibilities, his priorities. For 20 years, Olivia had organized her existence around growth. More ships, more routes, more revenue, more expansion. Every goal achieved simply created another goal beyond it. Meanwhile, Daniel Carter seemed perfectly content building a life centered around a single little girl. And somehow that made him seem richer than everyone else in the room. An hour later, the gala continued across multiple decks. A live orchestra played softly. Champagne flowed, executives networked. Investors negotiated. The atmosphere remained elegant and controlled, until Olivia found herself standing alone with Daniel, near the stern observation deck. The ocean stretched behind them, beneath a sky filled with stars. For several moments neither spoke. The silence felt surprisingly comfortable. Finally Daniel smiled. "You escaped." Olivia laughed softly. "So did you. Temporary escape. The responsibilities calling? My daughter made me promise I'd video call her before bedtime." Olivia looked down briefly. A strange warmth settled inside her chest. Every conversation with Daniel seemed to remind her of things she'd spent years overlooking. Family time, presents, Sybil promises, the things money couldn't purchase. Daniel leaned against the railing. How was your evening? The usual. Meaning, 3 acquisition proposals, 2 investor complaints, 1 politician asking for favors. Daniel chuckled. Sounds exhausting. It is. The answer came more honestly than she intended. For a moment neither spoke. The ocean breeze moved gently between them. Then Olivia surprised herself. Can I ask you something? Daniel nodded. Of course. She looked away toward the dark Atlantic. Suddenly the question felt ridiculous, childish, vulnerable, and yet she couldn't stop herself. For months the thought had lingered quietly beneath the surface. Tonight it finally emerged. Is my age a problem? The words left her mouth before she could reconsider. Daniel blinked, clearly caught off guard. Olivia immediately regretted asking. She was a CEO, a billionaire, a woman accustomed to confidence, not insecurity. Yet somehow Daniel Carter brought out honesty she rarely showed anyone. He studied her face, not judgmentally, not critically, simply thoughtfully. Before he could answer, a junior officer rushed onto the deck. Captain. Daniel turned. What is it? We've detected an unexpected navigation alert. His expression changed instantly, professional focused. The captain returned. Duty first, always. He looked back toward Olivia. For a brief moment neither moved. Then Daniel smiled apologetically. I have to go. Olivia nodded. Of course. He hesitated, almost as though wanting to say something, then the moment disappeared. The captain followed the officer toward the bridge, leaving Olivia alone beside the railing. And leaving her question unanswered. As she watched him disappear into the ship, she couldn't shake the feeling that something important had almost happened. Something neither of them fully understood yet. Far above them, dark clouds were beginning to gather on the horizon, and neither of them knew that before this voyage ended, their lives would change forever. Part 2. Captain Daniel Carter reached the bridge in less than 30 seconds, but by the time the automatic doors closed behind him, the atmosphere had already changed. The easy warmth of the gala deck vanished beneath the glow of navigation screens and the quiet concentration of his officers. A yellow warning icon pulsed near the edge of the radar display. Report, Daniel said. First Officer Miguel Reyes straightened. Unidentified weather cell forming 70 nautical miles east of our current route. The latest satellite update shows rapid intensification. It wasn't in the forecast we received before departure. Daniel stepped toward the console. The shape on the screen looked small, but its movement bothered him. Years at sea had taught him that the ocean rarely announced its intentions politely. He studied the pressure readings, the wind shift, the sea state projections. Adjust course 12 degrees south, he said calmly. Notify engineering we may increase speed after we clear the traffic lane, and update the passengers with a routine weather advisory. No alarm. Miguel nodded. Orders moved across the bridge with practiced efficiency. As the crew worked, Daniel's thoughts drifted back to the observation deck. Olivia's question lingered in his mind with surprising weight. Is my age a problem? It hadn't sounded flirtatious. It had sounded honest. And honesty was dangerous. For years Daniel had built his life around clear boundaries. He commanded a ship, raised his daughter, and kept everything else at a careful distance. Grief had a way of simplifying priorities. After Claire died, he learned that some promises mattered more than ambition, romance, or opportunity. Be there for Emily. Come home when you say you will. Don't build a life that takes you away from her. Those promises had become the architecture of his days. Now, Olivia Hart had stepped into that structure without warning. Olivia returned to her private suite on deck 15 shortly after midnight. The room was larger than most city apartments, decorated in soft ivory and deep navy, with a balcony overlooking the dark Atlantic. Normally she would have opened her laptop before removing her shoes. Tonight she simply stood by the window and watched the ship carve a silver path through the water. Her phone buzzed with messages from investors, board members, and event organizers. She ignored all of them. Instead, she replayed the conversation on the deck. Why had she asked that question? She had spent years projecting certainty. In boardrooms, certainty was currency. Yet around Daniel Carter, she found herself saying things she hadn't rehearsed. things that revealed more than she intended. Olivia crossed the room and sat at the small writing desk near the window. Without quite deciding to, she opened the company personnel database on her tablet. Captain Daniel Carter. The file was concise. Maritime Academy graduate. Former Navy navigation officer. Joined Ashford Oceanic Cruises 9 years earlier. Outstanding safety record. Passenger satisfaction scores consistently among the highest in the fleet. Then she reached the section that made her pause. Promotion offers declined. 3. Vice President of Fleet Operations. Senior Strategic Maritime Advisor. Director of International Routes, all declined. Olivia read the notes attached to the most recent offer. Captain Carter expressed gratitude for the opportunity, but stated that the position would require extended travel and irregular scheduling. He indicated he had personal commitments. He was unwilling to compromise. Personal commitments. Olivia leaned back slowly. Most people in the company would have fought for those promotions. They came with larger salaries, greater influence, private offices, and industry prestige. Daniel had walked away from all of it, not because he lacked ambition, because he valued something else more. For reasons she couldn't fully explain, that realization affected her more deeply than any romantic compliment could have. The next morning dawned gray and windy. The Ocean Empress had altered course during the night, and the seas rolled beneath the hull with a steady, muscular rhythm. After a brief breakfast meeting with investors, Olivia found herself heading toward the bridge. She told herself she wanted an operational update. She did not examine the explanation too closely. Daniel was standing near the forward windows when she arrived, speaking quietly with Miguel. He looked rested despite the overnight weather adjustment. "Good morning, Miss Hart," he said. "Olivia," she corrected automatically, then felt oddly self-conscious. One corner of his mouth lifted. "Good morning, Olivia." Miguel excused himself with suspicious efficiency, leaving them alone. Olivia glanced at the ocean. "I heard we changed course." "Slightly." The storm strengthened faster than expected. "Was it serious?" Daniel considered the question. "Not anymore." There was no boast in the answer. Just confidence. Olivia watched the waves strike the bow. "You saw it coming before the forecast did, didn't you?" He smiled faintly. "The ocean gives hints, and you know how to read them." Sometimes. Silence settled between them again, easier now than it had been the night before. Finally Olivia took a breath. "About my question yesterday." Daniel turned toward her fully. "You never answered." He was quiet for a long moment, not avoiding the question. "Thinking about it." "No," he said at last. "Your age isn't a problem." The words should have relieved her immediately. Instead, another question rose before she could stop it. "Then what is?" Daniel looked past her, through the bridge windows, toward the endless water ahead. "Timing." Olivia frowned. "Timing?" He nodded. "You're carrying an entire company on your shoulders. I'm carrying a 7-year-old girl through childhood. Those are both full-time voyages." There was no accusation in his voice, no rejection, just truth. And somehow the truth hurt less than uncertainty would have. Before Olivia could respond, the bridge intercom chimed. "Captain, Passenger Services reports a child missing from Deck 11 for approximately 8 minutes. Daniel's expression sharpened instantly. Description: female, age 7, dark hair, yellow raincoat. He was already moving toward the door. "Lock exterior access on decks 10 through 12. Begin standard search protocol." Then he paused beside Olivia. "This is why timing matters," he said quietly. And he was gone. Olivia stood alone on the bridge, watching the captain disappear into the corridor, with the controlled urgency of a man who knew exactly what was important. For the first time in years, she wasn't thinking about market share, fleet expansion, or the next quarterly report. She was thinking about a little girl in a yellow raincoat, and a captain who had built his entire life around never being late for the people waiting for him. Sishi Part 3. Within 15 minutes, the missing child had been found. She was asleep inside a quiet observation lounge on Deck 11, curled up in a corner chair with a book still resting in her lap. The entire situation ended harmlessly, but the response left a lasting impression on Olivia. She watched from a distance as Daniel knelt beside the little girl, before she was reunited with her parents. He didn't speak to her like a captain addressing a passenger. He spoke to her like a father. Calm but candid. The girl's frightened mother burst into tears the moment she saw her daughter. Daniel simply stepped back and allowed the family their moment. No speeches, no desire for recognition, no expectation of gratitude. Just another responsibility completed. As the crowd dispersed, Olivia found herself standing alone near the promenade deck overlooking the sea. The wind carried the scent of salt water across the vessel. Far below, waves crashed against the ship's hull in steady white bursts. For years she had believed leadership was measured by authority. Now she was beginning to wonder if leadership was actually measured by presence. Daniel appeared several minutes later. He seemed surprised to find her waiting. "Everything all right?" he asked. "She's safe." "She is." The captain leaned against the railing. "The parents were terrified. They love her." The simplicity of his answer made Olivia smile. "So do you." Daniel looked out toward the horizon. "Children have a way of becoming your entire world." Something softened in his expression, a look Olivia had only seen whenever Emily's name came up. "Every decision I make starts with one question." "What question?" He glanced at her. "Will this help me be there when my daughter needs me?" Olivia felt something tighten inside her chest. The answer explained everything. The declined promotions, the carefully structured schedule, the refusal to sacrifice personal commitments. Daniel hadn't built his life around career advancement. He had built it around fatherhood, and somehow, that made him more impressive than any executive she had ever known. That afternoon the ship resumed its normal rhythm. Passengers filled restaurants. Children ran between activity centers. Live music drifted through elegant lounges. The storm had passed. Sunlight reflected across calm Atlantic waters. Yet Olivia couldn't focus on any of the meetings scheduled for her. Her thoughts kept returning to Daniel. More specifically, to the life he had built. For years she had been surrounded by people obsessed with achievement. People who measured worth through titles, salaries, and influence. Daniel measured success differently. And the difference was becoming impossible to ignore. Late that afternoon, Olivia found herself walking through the crew section of the ship. It wasn't a place executives visited often. Most preferred luxury suites and executive lounges. But curiosity led her deeper into the vessel. Eventually she reached a recreation room reserved for crew members. The door stood slightly open. Voices drifted out. One of them belonged to Daniel. Without intending to eavesdrop, Olivia paused. "Emily wants to be a marine biologist this week." Laughter followed. "What happened to astronaut?" another officer asked. "That was last month." More laughter. "At this rate she'll have 20 careers before middle school." "Probably." The affection in Daniel's voice was unmistakable. Olivia smiled despite herself. Then another officer spoke. "Captain, why didn't you accept the fleet operations position?" The room grew quiet. Apparently this was a question everyone wanted answered. Daniel took a moment before responding. "Because fleet operations would have moved me to Singapore." So Emily's school is here." The answer came so naturally that nobody challenged it. One officer laughed. "You turned down a 7-figure promotion because of elementary school?" "Yes." The room exploded with amusement. But Olivia noticed something else. Nobody mocked him. In fact, they looked almost envious. One engineer finally shook his head. "You're a better man than me." Daniel smiled. "No, oh. Then why do you always seem so certain?" The captain became thoughtful. For several seconds nobody spoke. Then he answered quietly. "Because I already know what matters." The room fell silent, so did Olivia. Standing outside the doorway, she felt those words settle somewhere deep inside her, because suddenly she wasn't sure she knew what mattered anymore. That evening, the captain's dinner took place in the ship's grand restaurant. Traditionally, senior officers joined select guests and executives for a formal meal. Olivia sat across from Daniel. Between them stood candlelight, crystal glasses, and breathtaking ocean views. The conversation flowed easily at first. Travel, navigation, future cruise routes, passenger experience. But eventually, the other guests drifted into separate discussions, leaving the two of them in a quieter corner of the table. For several moments neither spoke, then Daniel surprised her. "You look tired." Olivia laughed softly. That's not usually considered a compliment. It wasn't meant as one. His tone carried genuine concern. The simplicity of it caught her off guard. "I'm fine." "No, you're functioning." She blinked. The distinction felt uncomfortably accurate. Daniel studied her carefully. "You haven't stopped working in years, have you?" The question landed harder than she expected. She looked down at her wine glass. "No." "Why?" The answer should have been obvious: success, responsibility, growth, expansion. Yet none of those explanations felt complete anymore. Finally she shrugged. "I don't know." For the first time in a very long time, she actually meant it. Daniel didn't push further. Instead, he smiled gently. "That might be the most honest thing you've said since we met." Olivia laughed despite herself. "You think I'm dishonest?" "No." He shook his head. "I think you're used to having answers." The captain was right, painfully right. Her entire career had been built on certainty. People came to her for solutions. Direct decisions, yet lately, certainty seemed harder to find, especially whenever Daniel Carter was involved. Later that night, long after dinner ended, Olivia stood alone on the upper observation deck. The Atlantic stretched endlessly beneath a sky filled with stars. The ship moved smoothly through calm waters. For once, she wasn't thinking about investors, or quarterly reports, or expansion plans. She was thinking about a little girl named Emily, a captain who never missed school pickups, and a question she had asked during the gala. "Is my age a problem?" At the time she believed the question was about years. Now she understood it had never been about age, it was about fear. Fear that she had spent so much time building a company, that she had forgotten how to build a life. Footsteps approached behind her. She didn't need to turn around, she already knew who it was. Daniel stopped beside her. For a while they simply watched the ocean together. Then Olivia finally spoke. "When you said the timing wasn't right," Daniel looked toward her. "Yes?" She took a slow breath. "And if the timing changes?" For the first time since they met, the captain seemed genuinely caught off guard. Neither spoke. The ocean rolled quietly beneath them. Stars reflected across dark water, and somewhere between the silence and the sea both of them understood that the answer to that question might change everything. Day Part 4. The Atlantic was unusually calm that night. From the observation deck of the Ocean Empress, the ocean looked like polished black glass, stretching endlessly beneath a sky crowded with stars. The ship moved smoothly through the water, leaving a trail of silver foam behind her. Most passengers had already retired to their suites. Music drifted faintly from a lounge several decks below, and the soft hum of the vessel's engines created the familiar rhythm that every seasoned sailor eventually learned to love. Olivia Hart stood at the railing, her hands resting lightly against the polished wood. For the first time in years, she wasn't thinking about business, not about acquisitions, not about investors, not about market share, not about the next expansion strategy. She was thinking about a question. And a man. When Daniel had said the timing wasn't right, she had expected the conversation to end there. Instead, it had opened something she hadn't anticipated, a possibility. A future she had never allowed herself to imagine. Footsteps approached behind her. She didn't turn around immediately. She already knew who it was. Daniel Carter stopped beside her, his captain's jacket moving slightly in the ocean breeze. For several moments neither spoke. The silence between them no longer felt awkward, it felt familiar, comfortable, the kind of silence earned rather than filled. Finally Daniel looked toward her. "You asked a question?" Olivia smiled slightly. "I did, and I never finished answering it." The CEO turned to face him. For the first time in her career, she felt genuinely nervous. Not presenting to investors, not negotiating billion-dollar contracts, not speaking before industry leaders. Just this. Daniel Carter standing a few feet away waiting. "You said the timing wasn't right," she said quietly. "It wasn't. And now?" Daniel looked out across the ocean. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the careful honesty that had always defined him. Now I think we're standing in a very different place than we were 6 months ago. Olivia listened. Not interrupting, not analyzing, simply listening. You were building an empire, Daniel continued. And you? I was surviving. The answer surprised her. Daniel rarely spoke about himself, rarely revealed anything beyond what was necessary. Yet tonight something had changed. When Claire died, he said quietly, I stopped thinking long-term. The mention of his late wife carried no bitterness, only truth. I focused on getting through the next day, then the next week, then the next year. He smiled faintly. Eventually those years add up. Olivia felt her chest tighten. She had known pieces of his story, not the full weight of it. You never considered moving on? Daniel laughed softly. People assume that's a switch. What do you mean? That grief ends one day and suddenly everything becomes simple. He shook his head. It doesn't work that way. The ocean breeze moved gently around them. You stop grieving eventually? No. His answer came immediately. You just learn to make room for other things. For some reason, those words affected Olivia deeply, because she suddenly realized she had spent years grieving too, not a person. A life, the family she'd never built, the moments she'd postponed, the relationships she'd sacrificed in pursuit of achievement. The difference was that she'd never called it grief. The next morning, the Ocean Empress arrived at Halifax Harbor. Passengers filled the outer decks to watch the coastline emerge through the morning mist. Crew members prepared excursion groups. Announcements echoed across the vessel. Everything appeared normal, yet something significant had shifted. Olivia noticed it almost immediately. For the first time since becoming CEO, she wasn't rushing. Her assistant called twice before breakfast. She ignored both calls. 3 emails marked urgent remained unanswered. She ignored those too. Instead, she found herself sitting in a small cafe aboard the ship, with Daniel and Emily. The experience felt strangely unfamiliar, and strangely wonderful. Emily sat between them enthusiastically explaining marine biology. Or at least the 7-year-old version of marine biology. Apparently dolphins were geniuses, whales were heroes, and octopuses were secretly plotting something. Daniel listened with complete seriousness. Olivia found herself laughing more than she had in months, maybe years. At one point, Emily stopped speaking and studied both adults carefully. It was the same look she gave puzzles, or maps, or problems requiring investigation. What? Daniel asked. Emily pointed. You smile more now. Olivia nearly choked on her coffee. Daniel laughed. Who? Both of you. The child seemed satisfied with her observation, as though she had confirmed a theory. Then she returned to discussing octopuses. Neither adult spoke for several moments, because both knew she was right. That evening, the ship prepared for its final gala dinner before returning to Boston. The grand ballroom glowed beneath crystal lights. Passengers danced. Champagne flowed. Music filled the room. Yet Olivia found herself spending very little time speaking to investors. Instead, she stood near one of the panoramic windows overlooking the ocean. Watching, thinking, reflecting. 20 years. 20 years of relentless ambition. And for the first time she questioned something fundamental. Not whether her career mattered, it did. Not whether achievement mattered, it did. The problem wasn't success. The problem was believing success alone was enough. Behind her, familiar footsteps approached. Daniel. Of course. He joined her near the window. The ocean beyond the glass reflected moonlight across calm water. For a while neither spoke, then Olivia smiled. I think Emily has been manipulating us. Daniel laughed. That's a terrifying possibility. I'm serious, so am I. They both laughed. The ease between them felt natural now, unforced, as though something important had quietly settled into place. Eventually Olivia turned toward him. There is one thing I still don't understand. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Only one? She smiled. Why didn't you answer my question that night, the gala? Yes. Daniel thought for a moment, then his expression softened. Because you weren't really asking about age. The answer immediately caught her attention. What was I asking? The captain looked directly into her eyes. You were asking whether there was room for you in someone else's life. The ballroom seemed to disappear, the music, the crowd, the conversations, everything faded, because deep down, she knew he was right. That had always been the real question, not age, not appearance, not attraction, belonging. Whether anyone could see beyond the CEO, beyond the title, beyond the success, and choose her anyway. Daniel smiled gently. My answer hasn't changed. Olivia waited. The captain took a step closer. Your age was never the problem. The words settled between them. Steady, certain, honest. What is the answer then? She asked quietly. Daniel glanced across the ballroom, toward the ocean, toward the future neither of them could fully see, then back at her. The answer, he said, is that some voyages are worth waiting for. For a moment neither moved, neither spoke, then Olivia laughed softly through unexpected tears. Not because she was sad, because she finally understood. Success had built her company, but connection would build her life. The following afternoon, the Ocean Empress returned to Boston. Passengers disembarked. Crew members completed procedures. The voyage ended. Yet something new had begun. As Emily exited the terminal between them, proudly carrying a small collection of seashells she'd gathered during the trip, she reached out and grabbed both of their hands. One hand belonged to her father, the other belonged to Olivia. Neither adult objected, neither pulled away. The little girl smiled, as though this outcome had been obvious all along. Ahead of them, the harbor sparkled beneath afternoon sunlight. Ships moved across the water, seagulls drifted overhead. Life continued. There were no guarantees, no contracts, no certainty about the future. Only possibility. A cruise captain who kept his promises, a billionaire CEO learning which promises mattered most. And a bright little girl walking between them, completely convinced they were headed in the right direction. For the first time in a very long while, Olivia believed she might be too.